Rain battered the cracked windows of Tyler Harding's rundown apartment when a desperate, weak knock echoed through the peeling door. Opening it, he found two shivering, identical little girls huddled in the freezing storm. He took them in for one night to keep them safe, entirely unaware that their mother was a ruthless billionaire CEO. His simple act of kindness would instantly drag his impoverished family into a deadly, high-stakes web of corporate kidnapping, millionaire conspiracies, and unthinkable betrayal. Thunder rattled the thin walls of the South Side Chicago apartment, threatening to shatter what little glass remained in the window panes. Tyler Harding stood over the rusty kitchen sink, scrubbing grease from his calloused hands with cheap dish soap. At 32, Tyler looked 10 years older. Life as a single father, balancing a grueling day job at a dilapidated auto repair shop and a night shift mopping floors at a community college, had etched deep, permanent lines around his eyes. He dried his hands on a frayed towel and glanced toward the small living room where his 6-year-old son, Leo, was fast asleep on a lumpy, hand-me-down sofa, wrapped tightly in a faded Superman blanket. Money was tighter than it had ever been. The eviction notice sitting on the kitchen counter, stamped with brutal red ink, was a ticking time bomb. Tyler had exactly $43 in his checking account, barely enough to keep the lights on and feed Leo for the remainder of the week. Another crack of lightning illuminated the cramped living room, casting harsh, jagged shadows against the peeling wallpaper. As the thunder rumbled away, a different sound caught Tyler's attention. It was faint, almost completely masked by the torrential downpour outside. Thump, thump. Tyler froze. It was past midnight. Nobody knocked on doors in this neighborhood at this hour unless they were looking for trouble. He quietly reached for the heavy metal flashlight he kept on top of the refrigerator, his heart pounding a steady, nervous rhythm against his ribs. He crept toward the front door, the floorboards groaning in protest under his weight. Looking through the scratched peephole, he expected to see a local gang member or a drunken neighbor. Instead, he saw nothing but the dark, rain-swept hallway of his building. He was about to turn away when the knock came again. Lower this time, striking the bottom half of the door. Frowning, Tyler undid the deadbolt and slowly pulled the heavy door open, keeping the flashlight raised. He looked down and immediately dropped his defensive posture. Standing in the dimly lit hallway, shivering so violently that their teeth chattered in unison, were two identical little girls. They couldn't have been older than Leo. Their blonde hair was plastered to their pale cheeks in filthy, wet strands. They were clutching each other, their wide, terrified blue eyes staring up at Tyler as if he were a monster they were expecting to devour them. Despite the thick layer of mud and grime covering them, Tyler's mechanic eyes, trained to spot expensive details, noticed their clothing. They were wearing matching trench coats that looked suspiciously like custom-tailored Burberry, now ruined by the storm. Underneath, their soaked dresses were made of fine silk, and the small leather boots on their feet, though scuffed and caked in Chicago street sludge, were undeniably high-end designer wear. "Hey," Tyler said, his voice dropping to a gentle, soothing rumble. He knelt slowly to their eye level, placing the flashlight on the floor so as not to frighten them. "Where are your parents, sweethearts? Are you lost?" The girl on the left, who seemed slightly more protective, tightened her grip on her sister's hand and took a half-step back, ready to bolt into the freezing rain. "It's okay," Tyler whispered, holding his hands up in surrender. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Tyler. It's freezing out there. You're going to catch your death in this cold. Do you want to come inside, just to warm up?" The girls exchanged a desperate, silent look. The sheer exhaustion in their small bodies won the silent debate. Slowly, cautiously, they stepped over the threshold into Tyler's apartment. He quickly shut the door behind them, locking out the howling wind and the freezing rain. Tyler immediately sprang into action, He grabbed the only 2 clean towels he had left from the bathroom and draped them over the shivering twins. He guided them to the small radiator in the corner of the kitchen, which was barely hissing out heat, but it was better than nothing. "Let's get those wet coats off," Tyler instructed gently. The girls flinched, but allowed him to unbutton the ruined designer coats. As he pulled the fabric away, he noticed a heavy, platinum locket hanging around the neck of the braver twin. It caught the dim kitchen light, revealing the heavily engraved initials VC surrounded by tiny, sparkling diamonds. Tyler swallowed hard. These were not local kids. These were children of extreme wealth, which meant they were either horribly lost or they were running from something terrible. "What are your names?" Tyler asked softly, grabbing a box of generic macaroni and cheese from the pantry. The last of their real food. The girls remained silent, pulling the towels tighter around their small shoulders. "That's all right," Tyler said, offering a warm, reassuring smile. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I'm going to make something hot to eat. My son Leo is sleeping right in there. You're safe here for the night." As the water boiled on the rusted electric stove, Tyler watched the girls out of the corner of his eye. They moved with a strange, synchronized grace, pressing their backs against the wall, their eyes darting around the modest apartment, taking in the water stains on the ceiling and the mismatched furniture. To them, this impoverished apartment must have looked like another planet. Tyler served them 2 steaming bowls of macaroni and cheese. They stared at the cheap plastic bowls for a long moment before hunger overtook their hesitation. They ate ravenously, practically inhaling the food. Tyler watched them, a heavy knot of worry forming in his stomach. He didn't even have a functioning landline to call the police, and his prepaid cell phone had run out of minutes 2 days ago. He would have to take them to the precinct first thing in the morning. For now, he laid out a few extra blankets on the floor near the radiator, creating a makeshift bed. The girls curled up together instantly, exhausted beyond measure. Tyler sat in the worn armchair across the room, watching them sleep as the storm raged on outside. He had taken them in for one night, just to keep them from freezing on the streets. He had absolutely no idea that in a penthouse overlooking the city, a billionaire empire was tearing itself apart over these 2 little girls. Morning broke over Chicago with a dull, gray light, the remnants of the storm leaving the city slick and cold. Miles away from Tyler Harding's dilapidated neighborhood, inside the gleaming, glass-walled apex of the Martin Industries skyscraper, Valerie Martin stood frozen, staring out at the hazy skyline. Valerie, at 34, was a titan of the tech and logistics industry, a self-made billionaire CEO known for her ruthless boardroom tactics and her impenetrable, icy composure. But this morning, that composure was entirely shattered. Her sleek, custom-tailored Tom Ford suit looked immaculate, but beneath the fabric she was physically trembling. Her normally sharp emerald eyes were red-rimmed and bloodshot, fixed blindly on the sprawling city below. Her daughters were out there, Chloe and Harper. Taken. The heavy mahogany doors to her office swung open, and her head of private security, a broad-shouldered ex-military contractor named David Vance, no, let's call him Jackson Briggs, stepped inside. His face was grim. "Ms. Martin," Briggs said, his voice low and tight. "The police have found the transport van. It was abandoned in an alleyway near the industrial district. But it was empty. The drivers were knocked unconscious." Valerie spun around, her manicured nails digging so hard into the leather of her briefcase that her knuckles turned white. "Empty? What do you mean, empty? Where are my girls?" "We believe they managed to unlock the rear doors during the storm when the van stalled out in the flooded streets. They ran, Ms. Martin. They're on foot somewhere in the city." Valerie closed her eyes, a sickening wave of nausea washing over her. She knew exactly who was behind this. Her ex-husband, Richard Belmont. Richard was a millionaire property developer, a man whose ambition vastly outweighed his competence. Their divorce had been brutal, but his recent financial ruin had made him desperate. He had demanded a $50 million buyout from her company, threatening to ruin her life if she refused. She had laughed him out of the building. She wasn't laughing now. Richard had hired mercenaries to take the girls, intending to hold them ransom to force Valerie to sign over a massive portion of her liquid assets. "Do not involve the police any further," Valerie commanded, her voice dropping to a terrifying, lethal register. "The chief is on Richard's payroll. I know it, and you know it. Deploy every private contractor we have. I will pay $1 million to the man who brings my daughters back to me unharmed. If Richard's men find them first." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Just find them, Jackson." Back in the South Side, the smell of burnt toast filled Tyler's small kitchen. Leo was awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring in absolute awe at the two identical girls who had mysteriously appeared in his home. Chloe and Harper were sitting on the edge of the sofa, looking significantly better after a night of warm sleep, though their eyes still darted nervously toward the windows at every passing siren. "Are you clones?" Leo asked bluntly, offering Harper a piece of heavily buttered toast. Harper, the slightly more outgoing of the two, accepted the toast cautiously. "We're twins," she corrected softly, her voice carrying a refined, polite cadence that sounded entirely out of place in the gritty apartment. Tyler walked in, wiping his hands on a rag. "Morning, girls. Did you sleep okay?" They both nodded silently. "I need to know your names," Tyler said gently, sitting down on the coffee table opposite them. "I need to know so I can help you find your mom and dad." Chloe, the quieter one wearing the heavy platinum locket, reached up and gripped the jewelry tightly. "Chloe," she whispered. "And this is Harper." "It's nice to meet you, Chloe and Harper. I'm going to take you down to the police station this morning so we can get you home. Your parents must be worried sick." At the word police, both girls dropped their toast. Pure, unadulterated panic flashed across their faces. Harper scrambled backward on the sofa, pulling her knees to her chest. "No, no police! Please, Tyler!" Tyler was taken aback by the sheer terror in the little girl's voice. Hey, it's okay. The police are the good guys. They help lost kids." "They're bad," Chloe cried, tears immediately welling up in her eyes. "The men who took us from our school, they had badges. They had suits and earpieces and badges, but they hurt our driver, Marcus. They dragged us into a dark van. They said if we screamed, they would hurt Mommy. Please don't take us to the police." Tyler's blood ran cold. He stared at the two little girls, processing the gravity of what they had just said. The men who took us. They hadn't wandered away. They hadn't gotten lost. They had been abducted. And the abductors were posing as law enforcement, or worse, they actually were corrupt law enforcement. "Okay," Tyler said, raising his hands, his mind racing. "Okay, no police, I promise. No police." He looked closely at Chloe's necklace again. The VC initials. He knew he recognized them from somewhere. He walked over to the small, cracked television in the corner of the room and turned it on, flipping through the static until he hit the local morning news channel. The screen flickered to life, displaying a breaking news banner in bright red. Above the banner was a high-resolution photograph of the two girls sitting in his living room, wearing pristine school uniforms. Next to their picture was a photograph of a stunning, sharply dressed woman with piercing green eyes. The news anchor's voice filled the room. "The city is in a state of shock this morning following the confirmed kidnapping of Chloe and Harper Martin, the twin daughters of billionaire CEO and tech magnate Valerie Martin. Martin Industries has just announced an unprecedented $5 million private reward for any information leading to their safe return. Authorities are baffled, but sources suggest—" Tyler muted the television, the silence in the room suddenly deafening. He slowly turned his head to look at the two little girls sitting on his thrift store sofa. He was a mechanic living paycheck to paycheck, facing imminent eviction. And sitting in his living room were the heirs to a billionaire empire, currently being hunted by highly organized, dangerous men who had already proven they were willing to hurt people to get what they wanted. "Oh boy," Tyler whispered, rubbing his temples as a sharp headache began to throb behind his eyes. He was way, way out of his depth. Tyler knew he had to move, and he had to move fast. If the people looking for the twins were organized enough to snatch them from a private school and bypass Valerie Martin's security, they would undoubtedly be tracking the escape route. The girls had wandered in the rain, but professional trackers wouldn't take long to narrow down a search grid. His apartment building, with its broken security cameras and apathetic landlord, offered zero protection. "All right, listen to me very carefully," Tyler said, his voice dropping into a serious, commanding tone that made Leo sit up straight. "We are going to play a game. It's called Invisible. We have to leave the apartment, but nobody can see us. Not the neighbors, not people on the street, nobody." He rushed to his closet and pulled out a few oversized, faded hoodies and a couple of Leo's old baseball caps. He dressed the twins, covering their distinct blonde hair and hiding their expensive, albeit ruined, dresses beneath layers of cheap, baggy cotton. He tossed Leo his winter coat. "Where are we going, Dad?" Leo asked, sensing his father's tightly coiled tension. "We're going to take a little field trip," Tyler lied smoothly. "Just stay close to me. Hold hands." Tyler peered out the dirty front window, looking down at the street 4 stories below. His breath hitched. A sleek, black, heavily tinted SUV was idling at the corner of his block. It looked entirely alien amidst the rusted sedans and broken-down pickup trucks that usually lined the impoverished street. As Tyler watched, 2 broad-shouldered men in dark trench coats stepped out of the vehicle. They didn't look like police officers. They moved with a predatory, tactical efficiency, their eyes scanning the fire escapes and alleyways. One of them tapped an earpiece, speaking into a microphone hidden in his collar. Richard Belmont's mercenaries had found the grid. "Time to go," Tyler said urgently. He grabbed a heavy wrench from his toolbox and shoved it into the front pocket of his jacket, a pathetic defense against armed men, but he wouldn't go down without a fight. Instead of going out the front door and down the main stairwell, Tyler led the children to the kitchen window that opened onto the rusted fire escape in the back alley. He pushed the stiff window up, the metal groaning loudly. He winced, praying the noise wouldn't carry. "Out we go, quick and quiet," he whispered. He lifted Leo out first, then helped Chloe and Harper. The cold morning air bit at their faces, but the adrenaline surging through Tyler's veins kept him warm. They descended the rickety iron stairs as fast as they dared, the metal steps slick with leftover rain from the storm. When they reached the alley floor, the stench of overflowing dumpsters hit them. Tyler crouched down, pulling the 3 children close. "Stay behind me," he mouthed. They crept along the brick wall, moving toward the adjacent street. Just as they neared the mouth of the alley, a shadow fell over the pavement. Tyler stopped dead, throwing an arm back to halt the kids. Footsteps crunched on the gravel. One of the men in trench coats had circled around to check the back exits. The man paused, pulling out a tactical radio. "I'm checking the south alley. Nothing yet. Proceeding to the basement level." Tyler held his breath. The man was less than 10 feet away, separated only by a large green dumpster. If the mercenary took 3 more steps, they would be face to face. Tyler's hand tightened around the heavy steel wrench in his pocket. He braced himself, ready to swing if the man came around the corner. He had to protect Leo. He had to protect these girls. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the front of the building, followed by the screeching of tires. A local resident, backing out of a tight parking spot, had slammed into the mercenaries' pristine black SUV. Shouts erupted from the front of the building. The mercenary near the dumpster cursed loudly, turning on his heel and sprinting back towards the street to see what was happening to their extraction vehicle. Taking advantage of the chaotic distraction, Tyler scooped up Chloe, who was too terrified to walk, grabbed Harper's hand, and hissed at Leo to run. They bolted out the opposite end of the alley, darting across the cracked pavement and diving into a narrow walkway between two abandoned storefronts. They ran for 3 blocks, twisting and turning through the labyrinth of the south side, sticking to the shadows, avoiding main roads and security cameras. Finally, exhausted and gasping for air, Tyler pushed open the side door of an old, crumbling Catholic church he knew well. St. Jude's. The sanctuary was dim, lit only by the flickering glow of prayer candles and the dull morning light filtering through stained glass. They collapsed into a back pew. The twins were panting, their eyes wide with fear, while Leo looked at his father with a mix of awe and terror. Tyler pulled out his dead cell phone. He needed a charger. He needed a secure line. He needed to contact Valerie Martin directly, bypassing the police, bypassing the public reward hotlines which were surely being monitored by Richard Belmont's people. "Are we safe here?" Harper whispered, her small hands shaking as she pulled the oversized hoodie tighter around herself. "For a little while," Tyler said, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked at the altar, then down at the 2 billionaire heirs sitting beside his own son. He was a nobody, a broke, single father who couldn't even pay his rent. Yet, somehow, the fate of the Martin Empire and the lives of these 2 innocent children rested entirely in his grease-stained hands. He had to find a way to reach the most powerful woman in Chicago, and he had to do it before the wolves outside picked up their scent again. The heavy oak doors of St. Jude's Church muffled the chaotic sounds of the city, wrapping the vast sanctuary in a thick, uneasy silence. Dust motes danced in the shafts of gray light, piercing the stained glass windows. Tyler locked the heavy iron bolt on the side door, his chest heaving as he leaned against the cold stone wall. "Everyone, stay low," Tyler whispered, ushering Leo, Chloe, and Harper towards the front of the nave. He guided them behind the heavy wooden pulpit, tucking them into a shadowed corner where they couldn't be seen from the aisles. The twins were trembling, their small hands gripping the fabric of their oversized hoodies. "Dad, I'm scared," Leo murmured, his lower lip quivering. He was a tough kid, raised in a neighborhood that demanded a thick skin, but the sheer terror radiating from the 2 girls had infected him completely. "I know, buddy. I know," Tyler said, pulling his son into a brief, tight hug. "But I need you to be brave. Can you watch out for Chloe and Harper for 5 minutes? I need to find Father Donovan and use his phone." Leo nodded, wrapping a protective arm around Harper's shoulders. The sight broke Tyler's heart, a 6-year-old forced to play bodyguard. He squeezed Leo's shoulder and crept away, keeping his head below the tops of the pews as he made his way toward the parish office near the sacristy. He found the office door ajar. Father Donovan, a frail man in his late 60s with kind eyes and a notoriously bad memory, was nowhere to be seen. It was Thursday morning. He was likely out delivering meals to the homebound parishioners, but sitting on the cluttered oak desk was exactly what Tyler needed: a heavy, black landline phone. Tyler slipped into the office and shut the door silently. He grabbed the receiver, checking for a dial tone. The steady, mechanical hum felt like a lifeline. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the piece of jewelry he had gently convinced Chloe to let him borrow for a moment: the heavy platinum locket. He held it under the dull light of the desk lamp. He had already realized that calling the main switchboard of Martin Industries would be a fool's errand. A billionaire's corporate firewall was designed to filter out thousands of crackpots, ransom seekers, and scammers daily. He would never get through to Valerie Martin. He needed a back door. Tyler squinted at the back of the locket. Beneath the sparkling diamonds and the engraved VC initials, There was a tiny, almost microscopic line of text. His mechanic's eyes, used to reading faded part numbers in the dark bellies of engines, managed to decipher it. It wasn't a jeweler's mark. It was a 10-digit phone number, followed by the words, Kensington Premier Medical, ID 884C. It was a private, ultra-exclusive concierge medical service, the kind of service that deployed helicopters and private trauma teams for the ultra-rich. If anyone could patch a call directly to Valerie Martin in an emergency, it was them. Tyler dialed the number. It rang only once before a crisp, professional voice answered. Kensington Premier, state your emergency and identification code. Listen to me very carefully, Tyler said, making his voice as deep and commanding as possible. I have Chloe and Harper Martin. They are safe, but they are in extreme danger. I need to speak to Valerie Martin immediately. Sir, this line is for medical emergencies only, the operator replied, her tone shifting to a frosty, practiced dismissal. If you have information regarding the missing children, you must contact the Chicago Police Department tip line. If I call the police, these girls will be dead in an hour, Tyler snapped, the raw desperation bleeding into his voice. The men who took them had badges. Do you understand? The police are compromised. Run ID code 884C. I have Chloe's platinum locket. If you do not patch me through to Valerie Martin in the next 10 seconds, whatever happens to her daughters is on your head. There was a heavy pause on the line. The rhythmic tapping of a keyboard echoed through the receiver. Then, a sharp intake of breath. Hold the line, the operator whispered. Tyler gripped the phone, his knuckles turning white. A faint click sounded, followed by the electronic hum of a secure routing system. He glanced out the small window of the parish office, which overlooked the main sanctuary. His blood froze. The heavy iron latch of the front church doors was slowly lifting. Someone was picking the lock. Tyler dropped to his knees, pulling the telephone cord with him, hiding beneath the edge of the desk. Through the crack in the door, he watched as a towering figure stepped into the church. It was one of the men in the dark trench coats from the alleyway. The mercenary moved with terrifying silence, a suppressed firearm gripped casually in his right hand. He was tracking them. He had followed their footprints, or perhaps questioned someone on the street. The man paused, his cold eyes sweeping over the empty pews. He began walking slowly down the center aisle, his heavy boots clicking menacingly against the marble floor. He was heading straight toward the pulpit where the children were hiding. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the phone receiver pressed against Tyler's ear. Who is this? Where are my daughters? The voice was female, razor sharp, and vibrating with an intensity that demanded absolute obedience. It was Valerie Martin. Tyler pressed his hand over his mouth, trying to steady his breathing as the mercenary's footsteps echoed just outside the office. He leaned in close to the receiver, cupping his hand around the mouthpiece to muffle his voice. They're safe, Tyler breathed into the phone, his voice barely a whisper. Chloe and Harper are with me. They're unharmed, but the men who took them are closing in. One of them is literally outside my door. High above the city, in the glass-walled fortress of Martin Industries, Valerie Martin gripped her phone so tightly the screen threatened to crack. Her head of security, Jackson Briggs, was standing beside her, frantically tracing the call on a glowing monitor. Who are you? Valerie demanded, her icy facade cracking to reveal the terrified mother beneath. How much do you want? I will wire $10 million into any offshore account you name. Just do not hurt them. I don't want your money, lady, Tyler hissed, insulted despite the terrifying circumstances. I'm a mechanic from the South Side. They showed up at my door in the storm. Your ex-husband's people, or whoever these goons are, have the local police in their pocket. We narrowly escaped them an hour ago. Valerie's breath hitched. He knew about Richard. That meant the girls had told him, or this man had figured out the conspiracy. Where are you? Valerie asked urgently, motioning for Briggs to hurry up with the trace. In the church, the mercenary stopped at the altar. He tilted his head, listening. Tyler knew that if he stayed on the line any longer, the trace would complete. And if Valeri's security team was compromised, the mercenaries would get the exact coordinates of the church. "I can't tell you where I am," Tyler whispered, his eyes locked on the crack in the door. "Your communications might be tapped. Your own security might be working for the people who took them." In the penthouse, Jackson Briggs stiffened. He shot a sharp, unreadable glance at Valerie. Valeri noticed the hesitation, a cold realization pooling in her stomach. "Listen to me," Tyler continued rapidly. "I will bring them to you, but it has to be public, a crowd. We need witnesses. The old rusted Ferris wheel at Navy Pier. It's closed for renovations, but there's a tourist market right next to it. Come alone? 1 hour. If I see anyone in a suit, if I see a single cop, I walk away and take the girls underground." "Wait!" Valeri cried. Tyler hung up the phone. He didn't have time to second-guess himself. The mercenary had turned away from the altar and was now walking deliberately toward the parish office, his gun raised. Tyler had to create a diversion, and he had to do it now. He looked around the cramped office. His eyes landed on the heavy brass fire extinguisher mounted on the wall near the door. He unhooked it silently. Taking a deep breath, he pulled the metal safety pin. As the mercenary reached out to push the office door open, Tyler kicked the door hard from the inside, slamming the heavy wood directly into the man's face. The mercenary staggered backward with a grunt of pain. Tyler didn't hesitate. He hurled the heavy fire extinguisher straight down the hallway, away from the sanctuary. It clattered violently against the stone floor, the nozzle snapping off. A massive cloud of thick, blinding white chemical foam exploded into the corridor, filling the air with a choking haze. The mercenary coughed violently, firing 2 suppressed shots blindly into the white cloud. Thwip! Thwip! The bullets shattered a stained glass window, raining colorful shards onto the floor. Tyler sprinted in the opposite direction, diving behind the pulpit where the children were huddled in absolute terror. "Go, go, go!" Tyler ordered, scooping Harper into his arms while grabbing Chloe's hand. Leo stayed right on his heels. They scrambled out the side door, bursting back into the freezing morning air of the alley. They didn't stop running until they had crossed 3 avenues, blending into the morning rush-hour foot traffic of the city. Meanwhile, back in the gleaming Martin penthouse, the air was thick with tension. Valeri stared at the dead phone in her hand. She turned slowly to her head of security. "Did you get the trace, Jackson?" Jackson Briggs shook his head, his expression perfectly neutral. "No, Ms. Martin. He used a routed line through the medical concierge. He dropped the call before our software could bypass their encryption. He's a ghost. He said Navy Pier. 1 hour, Valeri stated, her emerald eyes narrowing as she studied the man who had protected her for 5 years. "Prepare a vehicle. I'm going alone, just like he asked." "Ma'am, I cannot allow that," Briggs protested smoothly. "It's a blatant trap. Belmont is likely using this mechanic as bait to lure you out into the open. You are putting yourself in the crosshairs. I will send a tactical team to sweep the pier." "No," Valeri commanded, her voice turning to steel. "If you send a team, he'll run. I am going. And if I find out that anyone followed me, Jackson, you will be looking for a new career." She grabbed her trench coat and stormed out of the office. As the heavy mahogany doors clicked shut behind her, Jackson Briggs stood alone in the center of the room. The dutiful, concerned expression vanished from his face, replaced by a cold, calculating sneer. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a secondary, untraceable burner phone. He typed a message rapidly. "The target is moving to Navy Pier. The mechanic has the packages. Intercept and eliminate the mechanic. Retrieve the packages." He hit send, addressing the text directly to Richard Belmont. Tyler had been right to trust his instincts. He was walking right into a war zone, bringing 3 children into the crossfire of a billionaire's bloody divorce. As Tyler and the kids boarded a crowded, rattling subway car heading toward the waterfront, he gripped the heavy steel wrench in his pocket. He was just a single dad trying to make rent. But today, He was the only shield standing between two innocent girls and an empire built on greed. The CTA subway car rattled violently as it sped along the tracks, the fluorescent lights overhead flickering with every aggressive turn. Tyler sat in the hard plastic seat, his arm firmly wrapped around Leo, while Chloe and Harper huddled together on his other side. The oversized hoodies swallowed their small frames, concealing the ruined designer silk and the remnants of their billionaire pedigree. To the casual observer, they looked like a struggling father taking his kids on a dreary Thursday morning outing. But Tyler's eyes darted to every passenger who boarded at the stops. A businessman in a tailored charcoal suit reading the Wall Street Journal, a teenager blasting music through cheap headphones, an elderly woman clutching a canvas grocery bag. He analyzed their hands, their posture, looking for the telltale bulges of concealed weapons beneath winter coats. "Dad," Leo whispered, tugging on the sleeve of Tyler's worn jacket. "Are we going to be okay?" Tyler forced a warm, confident smile he absolutely did not feel. "Of course, buddy. We're just making a quick handoff. Then we're going to get the biggest deep dish pizza in the city, extra cheese." Harper looked up, her blue eyes wide. "Can we have extra cheese too?" The sheer innocence of the question nearly broke Tyler. "Yeah, sweetie. You can have whatever you want once you're back with your mom." The train screeched to a halt at the Grand Avenue station. Tyler ushered the children out, keeping a tight grip on them as they navigated the crowded turnstiles and ascended the concrete stairs into the biting wind rolling off Lake Michigan. Navy Pier was largely desolate this early in the morning, especially in the freezing post-storm chill. The massive, iconic Centennial Wheel was undergoing winter maintenance, its rusted scaffolding standing stark against the gray Chicago skyline. A few tourist traps were beginning to open. A Garrett popcorn shop venting the sweet, buttery scent of caramel corn into the cold air, and a small churro stand setting up its heat lamps. Tyler found a heavily shadowed alcove situated between a closed ticket booth and a locked maintenance shed. It offered a clear line of sight to the pier's main pedestrian promenade, while keeping the children completely hidden from the street. "Do not move from this spot," Tyler instructed, his voice low and firm. He looked directly at Leo. "You are the captain right now, Leo. You keep them against this wall. If you hear loud noises, you cover your ears and stay on the ground. Do you understand me?" Leo nodded, his small face set in a grim, determined line. Tyler backed away, slipping his hand into his pocket to grip the cold steel of the heavy mechanic's wrench. He walked out onto the open promenade, the freezing wind whipping at his unzipped jacket. At exactly 9 a.m., a sleek, armored Mercedes Maybach pulled up to the curb near the front gates of the pier. The engine idled with a barely perceptible purr. For a long, tense moment, the tinted doors remained closed. Then, the rear passenger door opened. Valerie Martin stepped out into the freezing wind. She was a vision of corporate power, draped in a custom-tailored camel hair trench coat, her blonde hair pulled back into a severe, elegant knot. But as Tyler observed her from 50 yards away, he saw the subtle cracks in her armor. Her pristine leather boots hesitated on the pavement. Her hands, shoved deep into her coat pockets, were trembling. She was scanning the empty pier with a frantic, desperate energy that no amount of billionaire poise could completely mask. Tyler took a deep breath, stepped out of the shadows and walked toward her. Valerie's sharp emerald eyes locked onto him instantly. She took a step forward, her posture rigid. She assessed his grease-stained jeans, his faded work boots, and the exhaustion etched deeply into his face. "Are you the man from the phone?" Valerie demanded, her voice cutting through the wind like a razor. She didn't wait for his answer. "Where are they? Where are my girls?" "Keep your voice down," Tyler said gruffly, closing the distance between them. He stopped 5 feet away, his eyes constantly scanning the parked cars along the street. "They're safe. But before I bring them out here, I need to know you weren't followed. I told you no cops, no suits. I came exactly as you asked, Valerie snapped, pulling a heavy, velvet-lined envelope from her coat. I have $250,000 in cash right here as a gesture of good faith. There is 10 million more waiting in a secure trust if you hand them over right now. Bring me my daughters. Tyler looked at the envelope, feeling a sudden burning flash of anger. Put your money away, lady. I didn't save your kids for a payday. I saved them because it was pouring rain and some armed psychos were hunting them down. Valerie blinked, momentarily taken aback by the genuine disdain in his voice. In her world, everyone had a price. Everyone wanted something. Then what do you want? I want to go back to my life, Tyler said flatly. I want to take my son home. I want you to take your kids, get back in your fancy tank of a car, and drive far away from my family. Fine, Valerie said, her tone softening just a fraction. Bring them to me. Tyler opened his mouth to call out to the alcove, but the words died in his throat. A heavy, matte black Chevy Suburban had just turned the corner, running a red light and accelerating aggressively toward the pier. It didn't slow down. It slammed onto the pedestrian curb, its tires screeching against the concrete, and came to a violent halt, blocking the Maybach. Before the vehicle even fully settled, the doors flew open. 4 men poured out. They weren't wearing police uniforms. They were dressed in tactical black gear, wearing heavy Kevlar vests. Leading them was a tall, heavily scarred man holding a suppressed submachine gun. Dominic Rossi, Richard Belmont's most ruthless private fixer. Valerie gasped, taking a stumbling step backward. No! Tyler's blood turned to ice. He looked at Valerie, his eyes blazing with fury. You brought them! I told you to come alone! I did! Valerie screamed, sheer panic finally breaking through her composed facade. I swear to God I didn't tell anyone where I was going except my head of security! The horrifying realization hit them both at exactly the same time. Her security was the leak. The billionaire CEO had been betrayed from the inside. Grab her! Dominic Rossi barked, pointing a gloved hand directly at Valerie. And find the mechanic! He has the packages! 2 of the mercenaries sprinted toward Valerie, drawing stun batons that crackled with high-voltage electricity. Tyler didn't have time to think. Instinct, honed by years of scraping by in one of the toughest neighborhoods in the country, took over. He wasn't going to let this woman be dragged away, because if she went down, the kids were next. As the first mercenary lunged at Valerie, Tyler stepped in, pivoting his weight. He whipped the heavy steel wrench out of his jacket pocket and swung it with bone-shattering force. The heavy metal connected solidly with the mercenary's kneecap. The sickening crack echoed over the roaring wind. The man let out a gargled shriek, collapsing into a heap on the pavement. Valerie stood frozen in shock. Move! Tyler roared, grabbing the lapel of her expensive camel haircoat and yanking her violently toward the food stalls. Suppressor fire spit through the air. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Bullets shattered the glass of the Garrett popcorn storefront right next to them, showering the concrete with jagged shards and caramelized kernels. Tyler dragged Valerie behind the heavy steel frame of a hot dog vendor's cart. She was hyperventilating, her perfectly pinned hair unraveling to fall wildly around her face. They're going to kill us, Valerie gasped, clutching her chest. The reality of the violence, unfiltered and utterly brutal, had finally pierced her insulated world. Not today, Tyler growled. Listen to me. Your security chief sold you out to your ex-husband. They aren't here to negotiate. They're here to take the girls and eliminate the witnesses, which means us. My daughters, Valerie sobbed, panic setting in. Where are they? They're hidden, but we can't stay here. Tyler peered around the edge of the cart. Dominic Rossi and his 2 remaining men were advancing slowly, checking the alleyways between the tourist traps. They were professionals, methodical, cold, and thorough. Tyler scanned his surroundings. About 30 yards away, parked near a loading dock, was a battered white Cisco food delivery box truck. The driver was nowhere to be seen, likely inside the main pier complex, finalizing an early delivery. "Do you know how to run?" Tyler asked, looking intently at Valerie. "I'm wearing $3,000 heels," she said, her voice shaking. "Take them off," Tyler ordered bluntly. Valerie didn't hesitate. She kicked off the designer boots, standing in her silk stockings on the freezing concrete. "When I say go, we run to that ticket booth," Tyler pointed to the structure where the kids were hiding. "Stay low." Tyler reached down and grabbed a heavy propane canister from the bottom of the hot dog cart. He twisted the valve until he heard the loud hiss of gas escaping, then shoved the cart hard out into the open promenade. Rossi and his men turned instantly, raising their weapons. Tyler grabbed a cheap souvenir lighter from the vendor's display, struck it, and tossed it toward the hissing gas as he grabbed Valerie's hand. "Go!" They sprinted just as the propane ignited. A massive fireball erupted with a deafening whoosh, sending a shockwave of heat through the freezing air and knocking one of the mercenaries flat on his back. Thick, black smoke billowed across the promenade, providing the perfect cover. Tyler and Valerie dove behind the ticket booth. "Dad!" Leo cried out, his voice cracking with fear. Valerie dropped to her knees, her hands flying to her mouth as she saw them. Chloe and Harper, huddled in the oversized, dirty hoodies, looked up. "Mommy!" they screamed in unison. Valerie wrapped her arms around both of them, burying her face in their blonde hair, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. "Oh my God, my babies, my beautiful girls. I've got you. Mommy's here." It was a profoundly beautiful moment, but Tyler knew it was going to be short-lived. The smoke from the explosion was already beginning to clear in the heavy lake wind. "We have to move now," Tyler interrupted, pulling Leo up by the arm. "The truck. We're taking that delivery truck." Valerie scooped up Chloe, despite the girl's weight, while Tyler grabbed Harper. They ran toward the loading dock, the cold biting at Valerie's stocking-clad feet. They reached the Cisco truck. Tyler yanked the driver's side door open. The keys weren't in the ignition. "Damn it," Tyler cursed. He threw Harper into the cab, followed by Leo. "Get in," he yelled at Valerie. Valerie shoved Chloe into the passenger seat and climbed up, pulling the door shut. "There are no keys!" she yelled over the engine noises of the approaching mercenaries. Tyler dove under the steering column. He was a mechanic. He knew the guts of heavy-duty commercial vehicles like the back of his hand. He ripped the plastic casing off the steering column, exposing a tangled nest of brightly colored wires. Through the windshield, Valerie saw the smoke clear. Dominic Rossi emerged, his face black with soot, his eyes locked dead onto the white box truck. He raised his submachine gun, aiming directly at the windshield. "Tyler!" Valerie screamed, pulling the children down onto the floorboards, covering their bodies with her own. "Got it!" Tyler roared. He stripped 2 wires with his bare teeth, touched the exposed copper ends together, and sparked the ignition. The heavy diesel engine roared to life with a violent shudder. Rossi opened fire. Bullets hammered into the reinforced steel grille of the truck. One round spider-webbed the windshield, missing Tyler's head by inches. Tyler didn't bother checking his mirrors. He slammed the heavy gear shift into drive, stomped his boot on the accelerator, and aimed the massive grille of the truck directly at the mercenaries. Rossi's eyes widened in sheer terror. He dove out of the way just as the 6-ton delivery truck plowed through the spot where he had been standing, obliterating a nearby churro stand in a shower of splintered wood and powdered sugar. Tyler wrenched the steering wheel, taking the tight corner of the pier's exit at an ungodly speed. The back tires skidded wildly against the ice-slicked pavement before finding purchase. They burst out of the loading dock gates, merging violently into the morning traffic of Lakeshore Drive, leaving the smoking ruins of the ambush behind them. Inside the cab, the air was thick with the smell of diesel and sheer adrenaline. The children were crying softly on the floor. Valerie remained hunched over them, her chest heaving as she stared at the man behind the wheel. Tyler's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle twitched in his cheek. He had just assaulted armed mercenaries, stolen a commercial vehicle, and involved his young son in a billionaire's lethal family feud. Valerie slowly climbed up into the passenger seat. The flawless, untouchable CEO was gone. In her place was a terrified, furious mother covered in soot, missing her shoes, sitting next to a South Side mechanic who had just saved all their lives. "They're going to hunt us down," Valerie whispered, staring at the spider-webbed bullet hole in the glass. "Jackson has all my tracking data, my accounts, my safe houses. He knows everything." "Then we don't go to your world," Tyler said grimly, shifting the heavy truck into a higher gear as they sped south, away from the glittering skyline. "We go to mine." The heavy Cisco delivery truck rumbled and groaned as Tyler navigated the maze of industrial warehouses lining the south branch of the Chicago River. The sun had finally burned through the overcast gray layer, casting a sharp, unforgiving glare over the decaying concrete structures. Inside the cab, the air hung heavy with silence, punctuated only by the soft, steady sniffles of the twins resting in the back with Leo. Valerie sat in the passenger seat, staring out the cracked windshield. Her designer coat was torn at the hem. Her silk stockings were laddered and stained with soot, and her bare feet rested on the rubber floor mat. She looked nothing like the untouchable tech titan who routinely graced the covers of financial magazines. She looked like a mother, desperate, exhausted, and profoundly humbled. "We're here," Tyler announced, cutting the engine. He pulled the truck into the dim, cavernous interior of a massive, derelict automotive garage with a rusted sign hanging loosely by a single chain: Harding and Sons Auto Repair. The corrugated metal roll-down door was halfway up, jammed on a track. Tyler killed the lights, plunging the vast space into deep shadow, save for the bright shafts of sunlight cutting through the grimy high windows. "Is this your house?" Harper asked softly, peering over the seat from the back, her small face smudged with dirt. "It's my shop," Tyler said, offering a gentle, tired smile over his shoulder. "It's not as fancy as your penthouse, sweetie, but it's got one important thing: heavy steel doors that lock from the inside." They piled out of the truck. Tyler immediately set to work, pulling a heavy hydraulic jack beneath the jammed metal door and cranking it up to secure the perimeter. He knew Richard Belmont and Jackson Briggs wouldn't stop. Now that the initial ambush at Navy Pier had failed, they would be mobilizing every resource at their disposal. They were running out of time, and they needed to counterattack before the mercenaries tracked the Cisco truck's GPS transponder. Valerie walked over to a scarred workbench where Tyler was tossing a handful of rusted tools aside. She crossed her arms, shivering slightly in the unheated garage. "Jackson knew our exact movements," Valerie said, her voice trembling with a mixture of grief and pure, unadulterated fury. "He has been my head of security for 5 years. I trusted him with my life, and more importantly, with my daughter's lives. He's been selling us out to Richard for months to fund his own offshore accounts." "A snake in your own house," Tyler muttered, wiping grease off his hands with a dirty shop rag. "That's the worst kind. But knowing he's the leak gives us an advantage." Valerie looked at him, her emerald eyes narrowing with confusion. "What advantage?" "We are trapped in an abandoned garage on the wrong side of the city with a stolen truck and no backup." "Not no backup," Tyler corrected. He walked over to a corner of the garage, pulled back a stained canvas tarp, and revealed an old, military surplus satellite phone encased in a rugged Pelican box. "An old army buddy of mine left this here 3 years ago before he went private. It's encrypted, totally off the grid, and bounces signals through a secure military relay that corporate hackers like Jackson can't touch." Valerie stared at the device, genuine shock flickering across her face. "You were in the military?" "Engineers," Tyler said dryly. "We fixed things under fire. Now hand me that notepad. Valery grabbed a greasy piece of paper from the workbench and handed it to him. Tyler began punching a rapid sequence of numbers into the satellite phone, his expression completely locked in. "Who are you calling?" she asked, leaning in close. "Federal Trade Commission and the U.S. Attorney's Office," Tyler said without looking up. "Not local cops. Federal investigators. My buddy works out of the Chicago Federal Building. I'm going to drop a bomb on your ex-husband's entire financial empire. Richard Belmont has been laundering corporate buyout funds through shell companies to finance these kidnappings. We have the paper trail. Or rather, you have it on your encrypted corporate server back at the tower." "My private server," Valery realized, her eyes widening. "Jackson has admin access to the main terminal, but my personal vault is encrypted with a quantum key that only I can unlock from an external terminal." "Can you access it from here?" Tyler asked, sliding the satellite phone toward her. Valery didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, picked up the rugged phone, and spoke a series of complex alphanumeric strings into the receiver, authorizing an emergency protocol that locked down every single asset, bank account, and subsidiary owned by Martin Industries and its corrupt subsidiaries. In a penthouse 30 miles away, Jackson Briggs stared at his monitor as his screen suddenly flashed a blinding crimson warning. "System locked. Unauthorized override detected." "Damn it!" Briggs slammed his fist against the mahogany desk, his face turning pale. He grabbed his phone and dialed Richard Belmont. "Boss, we've got a massive problem. Valery has locked down the master accounts. If we don't recover her and the girls within the hour, the feds are going to freeze everything." "Then find them!" Belmont roared through the speaker, panic creeping into his voice. "Burn the city down if you have to, but get my daughters and eliminate the mechanic." Back at the garage, the satellite phone crackled with a confirmation tone. "It's done," Valery breathed, a triumphant, fierce smile breaking through her exhaustion. "Richard's accounts are frozen. His shell companies are exposed. The federal task force is already dispatching tactical units to his office and to Jackson's location." Before Tyler could answer, a loud, metallic clang echoed from the front of the building. The heavy steel roll-down door shuddered violently. Someone was outside, slamming a heavy sledgehammer against the metal. "They're here," Tyler whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. He grabbed the heavy steel wrench off the workbench and moved quickly, ushering Leo, Chloe, and Harper into the back office of the garage, a tiny, windowless storage room filled with spare tires and old oil drums. "Stay in here, lock the door behind me, and don't make a sound no matter what you hear," Tyler instructed, his voice low and intensely serious. He looked down at Leo. "Take care of them, buddy." "Dad, no," Leo whimpered, grabbing his father's jacket. "I'll be right outside, Leo. I promise." Tyler gently peeled his son's fingers away, shut the heavy wooden door of the office, and clicked the primitive privacy lock into place. He turned around, picking up a heavy iron tire iron in one hand and a can of industrial degreaser in the other. He positioned himself directly in the center of the cavernous garage, facing the front entrance. Crash. The rusted chain of the roll-down door snapped with a deafening pop. The heavy metal sheet buckled inward, and 3 figures dressed head to toe in tactical black poured into the dim garage. Leading them was Dominic Rossi, his face twisted into a vicious, ugly snarl, holding a tactical shotgun. Behind him strode Jackson Briggs, his suit jacket discarded, a pistol raised and aimed dead ahead. "It ends here, mechanic," Rossi sneered, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Where are the kids?" Tyler stood his ground, his boots planted firmly on the oil-stained floor. "You're a little late, boys. The feds already have your boss's books. You lost." Briggs's face contorted with rage. "Kill him!" he barked at Rossi. Rossi raised the shotgun, his finger tightening on the trigger. Tyler braced himself, gripping the tire iron with every ounce of strength in his body, ready to charge. Blam! A deafening roar shook the warehouse, but the shot didn't come from Rossi's gun. A massive, high-caliber sniper round pierced the corrugated metal roof, striking the concrete floor inches from Rossi's boots in a blinding shower of sparks and pulverized stone. Before the mercenaries could react, the front skylights shattered in a coordinated rain of glass. Ropes dropped from the ceiling, and heavily armored federal tactical officers, wearing authentic FBI insignia, rappelled directly into the garage with military precision. FBI, drop your weapons! Down on the ground now! Dominic Rossi froze, looking wildly around the room as laser sights painted his chest in red dots. He slowly lowered his shotgun and dropped to his knees, his hands locked behind his head. Jackson Briggs cursed furiously, trying to raise his pistol, but before he could squeeze the trigger, a federal operative tackled him hard to the concrete, pinning his arms behind his back with a sharp click of steel handcuffs. The garage fell silent, save for the heavy breathing of the tactical agent securing the perimeter. Tyler slowly lowered the tire iron, letting out a long, shuddering breath he felt like he'd been holding for 24 hours. The door to the back office creaked open. Leo poked his head out cautiously, followed closely by Chloe and Harper. When they saw the federal agents and the arrested mercenaries on the floor, their eyes widened. Valerie stepped out of the office behind them, her posture tall, regal, and entirely unbroken. She walked across the concrete floor, her stockinged feet stepping past the restrained mercenaries without so much as a glance. She stopped directly in front of Tyler. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The chaos of the storm, the frantic phone calls, the bullets flying at Navy Pier, it all culminated in this quiet, charged stillness. Slowly, Valerie reached out and placed her hand gently over Tyler's grease-stained, calloused hand, which was still gripping the iron tool. "You saved my daughters," Valerie whispered, her emerald eyes shining with unshed tears. "You saved my life. I don't even know how to begin to thank you." "Just make sure my eviction notice gets tossed in the trash," Tyler replied, a tired, genuine smile finally breaking across his face. 3 days later, the headlines across the country flashed with the dramatic downfall of Richard Belmont and the exposure of Jackson Briggs's corporate conspiracy. Martin Industries announced a massive restructuring, accompanied by a permanent charitable foundation dedicated to supporting single-parent families in the inner city, directed by a newly appointed community board member named Tyler Harding. As Tyler stood on the balcony of a sunlit Chicago brownstone, no longer facing eviction, his future secure, he watched Leo playing tag in the courtyard with Chloe and Harper, who were visiting for the weekend with their smiling, radiant mother. If this dramatic story of survival, immense wealth, and unexpected bonds kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life thrillers. We'll see you in the next video.